is not prepared to reform the electoral process through the new bill. And I won't be surprised if the president doesn't sign the bill. There will always be excuses. Been in this game since 2018. Whereas the APC, as an opposition political party, was campaigning for electoral reforms. Right? The party is not prepared to allow the status quo to change. Status quo that promotes rigging of elections, violent elections, inconclusive elections, and the tribunalization of the electoral process. I'm talking of, asking courts or tribunals to determine the winners of election as opposed to the people. So, the ruling party wants the situation to remain. Hence, there is no prayer on the president to sign the electoral bill into law. It's a challenge to all Nigerians. Once the 30-day period expires, the bill goes back to the National Assembly, and Nigerians have to mount prayer on the National Assembly
to override
the veto of the president. Yeah, we can't go on like this.
Well, we're taking on issues that have to do with the Electoral Act right now, and joining us in the studio this morning is Mr. Femi Adesina, who is the Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity. Mr. Adesina, welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Perhaps the first question I should ask you is, when is the President going to sign the Electoral Act?
He will sign it any moment from now. It could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be any time, but within the 30 days.
Why has it taken so long?
Well, how do you define so long? If the law gives 30 days for something to be done, so what then is so long? As long as it's done within that window.
So the first time, well, this is not the first time really. For those who are counting, they will say this is the 6th time the Electoral Act has been before the president. But let's talk about the 5th time, when we were quite optimistic that in a matter of no time, as a matter of fact, the president was going to put pen to paper and sign the Electoral Act. And then there was a huge conversation around direct and indirect primaries, or direct primaries being the only clause included in the Electoral Act, and there were, questions as to whether or not the president will sign with that. It took all of 30 days for the president to finally make up his mind. In fact, some people count 31 days before he eventually sent it back to the National Assembly with the reservations that he had. Some people say that if it was just that reservation alone, it shouldn't have taken all of 30 days. Looking at the fact that we're running out of time and then it's gone back to the National Assembly, they've done it, they've made the adjustments speedily, and they've sent it right back before the end of January. January 31 is what you have remembered as the date it was sent back to the president. They did their work in good time, and they were hoping that the president will show that alacrity in terms of the time needed to eventually get this underway. Why is it taking so long?
It brings us back to the earlier question. I answered, how do you determine so long? If the Constitution gives a time limit, do it within 30 days. And the 30 days have not elapsed, then you can't say it's so long.
The intention of the Constitution,
as long as it's done within time.
It cannot be that, you have to take up all of the 30 days every time that a bill is sent to you. It is a window within which you can look at a bill.
Yes.
But for a bill as important as the Electoral Act, shouldn't we show some speed and some, prioritize it, show some, attach some importance, so to speak, in terms of what time in which we pass such an important act?
Do you also know that order is better than speed? You can be in such a rush that you muddle things up. But when you do things systematically, methodically, orderly, the chances of making mistakes and committing errors are reduced.
What
And
system
is
is
why,
in place right now? What system are we putting in place this time around?
how exactly do you mean?
You just talked about system and method and order.
Yes, we stay within the constitutional requirement, which is that do this within 30 days.
Are you saying that the 30 days will be exhausted first before
It could be today.
eventually?
It could be signed today. It could be signed tomorrow. That's what I'm telling you.
Well, what it has given is now, because today is the day that CSOs have now said they're going to, be marching to try and get the president to look at this bill and understand the importance they believe should be attached to this bill. I think they have a day of action today. But it has given room for people to now start giving other reasons why the president might not want to sign. You heard Mr. Femi Falana there, a senior advocate of Nigeria, saying that the ruling party has no intention of signing this, of asking the president to sign this, or it's not to the advantage that this is signed.
Mr. Falana,
you've heard new controversies
Mr.
around...
Falana is a senior friend, but he will be surprised this time. He will be surprised. In a matter of hours, he will be surprised.
In a matter of hours?
Yes, not days. Hours could be 24 hours, it could be 48 hours, not days, not weeks.
You also issued a statement yesterday asking Electoral, I don't know who precisely you were asking, maybe CSOs or who, I don't know. Could you tell us precisely who you were asking to stop playing politics with the Electoral Act?
No, it's a combination, not just CSOs. Because some of the CSOs were actually being prodded.
By who?
That's why we said stop playing politics with it. Some of them are being prodded.
By who is the question?
No. We know what we know. We know what we know. Some people who use every opportunity to want to foment trouble in the country. And it doesn't have to be so because it's our country. Those who are in government are stakeholders in the country. CSOs are stakeholders in the country. So Nigeria does not belong to one set more than to the other set. That's what we're saying.
Have there been any reservations this time around by the president on signing this Electoral Act?
No. You know, before the president will put pen to paper on any legislation, also particularly this one that has to do with our electoral fortunes, it has to be looked at and looked at and looked at. It has to buy opinions from different stakeholders. And having been satisfied that the necessary due diligence has been done and he will not be making any error, then he will sign. And I tell you that Nigerians will get to hear about this bill in hours.
Let's flip this to Lagos now. I understand my colleagues have questions.
Well, Mr. Adesina, one of the natural questions that comes to mind is some of the issues that the CSOs have raised. And, well, maybe, as you said, should look to the hours. But then, there are those who wonder if INEC, for instance, needs a certain number of days within which to make the announcement, release the timetable and all of that, and the law that is supposed to guide the election is not in place. That's part of the reasons that people are asking these questions. So perhaps that underscores the reason my colleague has been asking, why is it taking so long?
No, all those people who are raising those issues do not know better than INEC. And the chairman of INEC has come out to say that as desirable as this electoral amendment bill is for it to be signed by the president, it will affect the date of elections already fixed for next year. Because in the previous years, previous occasions, as Marque mentioned, that bill came up for signature and it was returned. Did it affect election? No, it didn't, because there's an extant Electoral Act. You just revert to it. I'm not saying that in this particular issue that is what will happen, no. But the INEC chairman has said whether it's signed now or later, it will not affect the date of election fixed for next year.
But that if the bill is not signed into law, the new bill is not signed into law, is that to say that the calculation of the presidency is to revert to the previous act?
No, I didn't say that. What I have said is that in a matter of hours, we will know what happens to the electoral bill from the president's end. So,
Right, so
don't let's second guess what will happen. We will get to see it in a matter of hours.
all right. So sounds to me as though that bill will be signed into law today. So February the 22nd, it is. But
I didn't say today.
okay. Well, we'll wait and see, as you said.
But something will happen soon.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about still that the CSO's declaration of National Day of Action. It would seem that that forced the presidency to give out the statement, which was signed by you. And I'm thinking, is the presidency afraid of such demonstration of rights, constitutional rights of protest? Because it sounded as though you didn't want that to happen. Is that the thinking, like, you people should not do this, this is not what we want, just wait and allow us do what we want to do?
Afraid? I'm surprised you use that word, afraid. If you know this presidency, you know the president, you know this administration, it does the right things, so it has no cause to fear. You can fear when you are not doing the proper things. This presidency fears nothing because it does the right things at the right times. There's no cause for fear. And talking of National Day of Action, in a democracy, demonstrations will be legal, will be right, will be fair, will be just. Only that, do all things within the law. That's all the government wants. Do it within the law. And if you choose to now have a National Day of Action on the 22nd day after a bill was passed to the presidency, and it still has about a week to do the proper thing on that bill, then aren't you being premature?
Well, that National Day of Action...
While the CSO have a right to go on protest, I'll just say maybe they should have waited a bit more.
Okay, so that National Day of Action is predicated upon the time frame, as has been mentioned earlier, 360 days to give notice for an election. If it's meant to take place, February 18th next year. So by the calculation, I thought, you know what, this is the last day the president has to sign, which is why I also said that, well, the president might just sign it today. But regarding that National Day of Action, are you saying it might be unlawful or wrong to carry out that act? I just want to clear that out.
Unlawful would not be my word. Rather, I would say inexpedient. It may be inexpedient, but definitely not unlawful. In a democracy, protests will always be legitimate. But are they expedient? No. I'll say having that National Day of Action today is inexpedient because there is still a window of about a week for that bill to be signed. And like I said, a revert will come on that bill in a matter of hours, 24, 48, but definitely not exceeding the 30 days that the Constitution requires.
It's interesting that you put hours into 48 when 48 hours makes 2 days. But, I mean, you're a journalist, so I'll give it to you.
It's still hours.
I understand.
It's still hours.
I understand.
Even if it's 3 days, it's 72 hours.
Even if it's 360 hours, it's still hours. I understand. But, you know, when you said the other time, Mr. Additional, that in a democracy, protests and all are legal, are permitted, aren't they avoidable? I mean, because if people expect that some things should be done by certain, institutions such as the presidency, and they're not done expeditiously, it is the reason for protests. So isn't it avoidable to have these protests by just doing things as expeditiously as necessary?
When you say expeditiously, and there's a window, there's a time frame, if it's done within that time frame, it is still expeditious. That's just it. As long as it's not done outside the time, it is still expeditious.
Okay, so this is what, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Additional. So this is a thinking I'm having. The CSOs declare a National Day of Action and say the president should or must sign that bill into law if we're going to meet the time. And perhaps the presidency had been making plans to actually get the president to sign or to make that announcement on the same day of the National Day of Action. So is this trying to take the steam off the CSOs so that it is seen as though you didn't force us to do this? We want to do it on our own volition. Am I right?
Well, you said the CSO said it must sign. There's no must in democracy. There's no must. Who gives an order to an elected government? Well, the best they can do is to go and get elected. You don't give order to an elected government because millions of Nigerians elected that government. So you can't come and say you must do this. There's no must in democracy.
Well, the
No
must
must.
is conditional,
And
Mr. Adesina. But that's not even the question.
The president, okay.
Pardon me, the must is
please,
conditional.
go ahead.
If we will meet the time frame, so the president must sign on the 22nd, if we will meet that time frame, which INEC has said. So it's a conditional, I mean, it's not a force, I imagine. But the question is this coming out to take the steam of the CSO, saying you didn't force our hand, we wanted to do it anyway, so don't try to take the glory for this one?
If there was an attempt to take this team out of what the CSO are planning, then it will be signed yesterday. Because today is the day of action, and today has come. So if there was any intention to take this team out of it, then it will have been signed yesterday. All I'm trying to say is that the CSOs have a right to do what they are doing, and government also has a right to sign when it will sign.
Let's look into the nitty-gritties of this bill. There are talks about meetings that the president has had and Clause 84 in that bill. So the thinking is that the president, yes, will sign this bill into law, but then will make or call for an amendment to that Clause 84, which has been quite contentious. We've seen that with the PIA. The president signed but sought an amendment or re-amendment in this case. So is that the thinking also? Would we be seeing a re-amendment to this Electoral Act when it's eventually signed?
There is always room for that in our democratic setting. Look at the PIA that was passed in August last year. I think about 2 amendments have been sent to the National Assembly. So there is always opportunity to do that. If there is an issue, if you look at our statement yesterday, it said that that piece of legislation must be made as near perfect as possible, near perfect. In other words, it recognizes that it may not be completely perfect. And that's why you have the window of sending amendments to the National Assembly. But since we are not out of time, since the executive is not out of time, it wants to make that piece of legislation as near perfect as possible. And then after it's been signed into law, if there are other areas that need to be looked at again, of course, an amendment can always be sent to the National Assembly.
So, indeed, that clause... please go ahead, Mark.
Well, that's why we're wondering why the president, didn't sign this the first time. I think it was the governor of Rivers State who pointed it out, that for bills which the president considered important to him, he signed with immediate alacrity, almost, and then sent those bills with amendments to the National Assembly to say, I have signed, but please could you take a second look at this pieces of legislature.
It's not a rule.
It perhaps isn't, but that's what we've seen in bills which which have been, earth-shaking, so to speak, which the administration considered landmark, both for the National Assembly and even for the executive arm of government. And people thought that this Electoral Act should qualify along that realm as well. You don't think so?
No. What I'm trying to say is that it is not a rule that the president will always sign and then seek for amendment later. Things can be done right as long as they are done within the time frame.
Okay, so it isn't true indeed that the president can sign within the time frame, but the problem right now is the time. My colleague has raised the implications that has been brought to our attention, that if the president signs later than today, you know, there could be implications for the timetable as released by INEC. This is some of the fears that they have. That hasn't been brought to your attention.
That is not what the national chairman of INEC said. Look at what he said. He said it will not affect the dates already fixed for election next year, no matter how it goes. That's what the chairman of INEC said.
Is there a desire on the part of the president and presidency to see that this Electoral Act is also used, you know, for some of the off-season elections? Because some people will say that, you know, that will be a way to really check if this Electoral Act is the way to go. You have said that since this is going to affect our fortunes, what we're looking to do is produce a near-perfect bill. I think those are your words.
Yes.
If that is the situation, wouldn't it be the desire of the president and the presidency to see that, you know, indeed this thing is put to test in some of these off-season elections we have, and perhaps any amendments made before we eventually go into the general elections in 2023?
The moment it is signed, it becomes law. The moment it is signed, it becomes law. So it can be used for the off-season elections, which will not come till maybe June and July for Osun and Ekiti and all that. The moment the bill is signed into law, it becomes a law that is effective in the country.
Well, you have counted, you said 21 days, the president still has about a week. For those who are also counting alongside with you, I think that's why they are now afraid that it's taking 21 days. The time is about to run out again, and the president will not sign this thing. He's going to come up with another excuse and send it back to the National Assembly, amend it another time again, and then you can send it back, and then on and on it goes until it's too late to sign this Electoral Act.
No, I think
and they have good reason to exercise those kinds of fears, because the president has done it before.
No, some people just revel in muddying the waters when there is no reason to foment trouble. They go looking for one.
No, but Mr. Additional, let's be fair to the people who bring up these fears. The Electoral Act amendment preceding the 2019 elections, we saw what became of that.
Yeah, and what was the reason given? The time it was brought was too short.
Indeed. We saw how many times it was sent to the president before the final time it was sent to him, where he said the time was too short. And that's what they've been trying to avoid.
Only one instance was time cited. The previous ones, there were other reasons.
Exactly. So there were other reasons, and it kept on going back until finally it was brought to the president, and then he said the time was too short. So there's precedent for their fear. There is, you know, history, you know, trailing the fears that people exercise, or the anxieties that they have over the president not signing the Electoral Act 21 days after it was sent to him a second time.
What I would just tell those people who fear is that rather than fear, they should fear their own fear. With President Buhari, he's a straight man. He will do what he wants to do, which is best for the country. All those who fear unnecessarily should begin to fear their own fear. There's no reason to fear.
You know, I think just the second time, just before, I don't know whether to qualify this, the second time of the second coming of this Electoral Act, just to also make sure that everything was okay. CSOs also went into great pains to look at grammatical errors, errors of syntax, etc., to ensure that, you know, when it is sent back to the president again, he doesn't have these as excuses, because that has happened before.
If there are drafting errors, should it still be signed? When we can perfect those things, when a president appends his signature to glaring drafting errors, how does it portray Nigeria? So it should be made perfect or near perfect. That's what we're saying.
Well, they have these same CSOs, which you also say you're addressing. They're the ones who have pointed out these little minute errors, and they have said this time around that these errors have been corrected.
Good.
All of this just to be sure that it doesn't take another 21 days in the presidency before it is, you know, before pen is put to paper. Still, it doesn't look like, it looks like we're going to exhaust the 30 days before the president eventually puts pen to paper.
They should fear their fears. Nothing like that will happen.
Oh, we have a break at this point. We'll come back and continue this conversation, perhaps on other matters as well, especially what the president will be doing to those who brought in bad fuel. Do stay with us. Mr. Femi Adesina, Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, is still with us in the studios, and he said that the President will sign the bill, the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, in a matter of hours. I mean, he hasn't specified how many hours, but perhaps, you know, it will be less than 24 hours. We do not know. Are you going to clarify, you know, how many hours?
Even if it's 48 or 72, it is still hours.
Okay.
But it is not going to take longer than necessary.
The necessary doesn't give an indication into...
It does. It does. If something delays, then it's longer than necessary. But this will not delay.
You don't think that 21 days is a delay already?
No, 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 because it's within the time frame. It's within the time frame.
Okay, so let's take on other matters. This issue of fuel scarcity, which has affected a lot of Nigerians over the issue of adulterated petrol brought into the country. How has the president taken on this matter?
You know, each time this issue of the fuel scarcity comes up, there's also a word that comes to my mind. That word is called SNAFU, S-N-A-F-U. And it's an acronym for Situation Normal All Fouled Up, SNAFU. What happened is a SNAFU in the petrol supply chain in the country. Because in the life of this administration, which will be 7 years in May, it's only one major fuel scarcity we have had. Now, there's a SNAFU, a normal situation fouled up. And some people are carrying on as if heavens are falling. No, no. We should always consider the past and the present in this country. More than any other administration, this one has restored normalcy in petroleum supply for years.
You know, it is a type of... it's what has caused this particular one.
Yes.
You have termed it snaffle.
Yes.
That the situation was fouled up.
Yes.
Isn't that correct?
Yes.
The situation was fouled up, and this was done by people in, you know, done by, will I say oversight, was committed by an oversight. Shouldn't there be questions, queries, and if possible, heads rolling over the sort of oversight that has caused great pains to many Nigerians? People have spent hours, days in some instances, at filling stations trying to get petrol. Some people have had their cars damaged as a result of what has happened. And these are all inconveniences to Nigerians that were totally avoidable, but because of a slip or an oversight, this has happened. Isn't that something that should be happening within the presidency?
It's regrettable that Nigerians have had to stay hours on end at petrol station. My driver goes to also queue up for hours before he gets fuel. It has happened to everybody. Some people have had their car engines damaged, very regrettable. But then we should not forget that it is not a routine or regular occurrence in the country. And if there was oversight, there is already a structure that can deal with that. And we have been told that it's going to be looked at. Even the House of Representatives has resolved to probe what happened. So it's not as if some people are culpable, then it will be overlooked.
Mr. Adesina, I mean, this is not the first time we've been in this country where the House of Reps has looked into a situation that has to do with petrol. I mean, you and I were both journalists in that period when the House of Reps looked at an issue that had to do with petrol subsidies. And we understand that at the end of the day, what came out of the House of Reps or even the National Assembly as a whole was considered a mere resolution by the executive arm of government, and that did not need any action from them. We know that when action really needs to be taken, it should come from the executive arm. Well, it could come from the National Assembly, but precedent shows us that oftentimes that is not the situation. So beyond what the House of Reps is doing, has there been any further interest by the executive arm of government as, you know, empowered in the presidency to take a second look or to ask that it be done speedily, some interest to show that there is some importance attached to this?
Definitely, definitely. There has been a meeting of all the stakeholders in the sector, which held at the presidential villa. And the directive from the president is resolve this thing within the shortest possible time. It doesn't mean that there will not be sanctions eventually against those who are culpable. But that is not the interest of Mr. President at this time. The interest is reduce this hardship, eliminate it completely through adequate supply of fuel. That's what Mr. President is involved in. There is a structure that deals with infractions, and that will happen.
Well, there's so many questions that have been raging in the minds of Nigerians. Just yesterday, we spoke with the Standards Organization of Nigeria, and they were saying, oh, they have the ability to test petrol or any sort of, product that is brought into the country and let the PPMC or, the agency in charge know just what is inside of the petrol. So there have been questions as to, is it that the petrol that is brought into the country is not tested? Because for a number of people, much as this can be a one-off glitch, it was a major glitch. It was a major glitch, and it was a totally avoidable glitch if systems were working. So the question is, what happened to the systems of checks that ought to have ensured that this sort of glitch was picked up in the nick of time?
Yeah, but the question also would be that if that system worked for 6 years running, and that glitch didn't happen, from that glitch, lessons can then be learned. That's just a simple conclusion I can reach. If it worked for 6 years and you didn't have that glitch, you didn't have cases of adulterated fuel coming into the country, recall that under the military, particularly under General Sani Abacha, we had cases of adulterated fuel. We had this same case under that administration.
General Sani Abacha is a long time ago.
Yes, but it happened.
It's
in the history of the country.
A lot of people who are eligible to vote now would not even remember the era of General Sani Abacha.
It happened. It happened. So what I'm trying to say.
The point I'm trying to make is that was a long time.
Oh, no, whether long or short.
In the history of our new democracy, we haven't had an instance of adulterated fuel of this magnitude
whether
and
long
scale.
or short, the point is that glitches do happen. This one has happened, and the country must learn from it, and it shouldn't happen again.
Let me flip this to Lagos. Gentlemen.
Well, thank you, Mark. I'm glad that Mr. Adeshino says that he's also experienced this by proxy, and this is the experience of a lot of Nigerians, lost man-hours, livelihoods, traffic, the damage to vehicles you talked about, and so much more. But when you talked about infractions being punished, I mean, a lot of Nigerians want to believe that, and I think it will be predicated on perhaps what they have seen in the past. Can you remind Nigerians, I mean, an infraction that was punished in recent times, maybe in the last 6 months or a year, by this government?
No. It's not in my place to begin to keep a record or register of infractions being punished. No. In the life of a country, many things happen. Many things happen, and we don't begin to open a register and record it. This one committed this infraction, he was punished this way. No. It will not be in my place to start doing that.
Okay, I think a yes or no would suffice then. Has any infraction been punished in recent times, in the past 3 months or 6 months?
No. Well, one of the reasons government exists is to ensure that there is law and order in the country. And if there is no punishment, law and order will break down. So, government is playing its part, is alive to its duties and responsibilities in the country.
Okay, so clearly there's nothing to point to for people to say, well, it has happened in the past. We've seen this government come hard on a certain agency or an agent in the agency who dropped the ball. So it'll be difficult to want to expect from this one. But seeing that the president is a minister of petroleum, and we have a minister of state, is the president also taking responsibility for this? Because this is directly under his purview.
The president takes responsibility for everything that happens in the country because it's under his watch. He takes responsibility for everything that happens in the country, not just a glitch in petrol supply, everything. Anything that happens under his watch, he takes responsibility. And he does whatever should be done.
So is the president taking responsibility directly for, as Minister of Petroleum? That's the question my colleague asked you, Mr. Additional.
Yes, and that's the answer I've given.
Okay, so if he has taken responsibility...
For instance, oh yes, for instance, when the GMD of NNPC company apologized to Nigerians, on whose behalf was he doing it? Is it on his own behalf, or on behalf of the government, and on behalf of the Minister of Petroleum, and on behalf of the President? He did that on behalf of the President, who is also the Minister for Petroleum.
I mean, quite instructive that, because I think it's important for people to begin to see that, and not just to hear the apologies, but to see that things are actually done, which is why it will be important to follow this through. And since you've said that the president is going to follow this through, ensure that things normalize, and then we'll see perhaps the sanctions, the Nigerians will hold that definitely. But why has it taken this long is another question that bugs the minds of a lot of Nigerians, because this has been on. In fact, speaking to the head of Petron, as of 2 weeks ago, he said that this was discovered February the 2nd, okay, and now this is February the 22nd. So 20 days, and we're still having challenges getting petrol. I mean, if you come to Lagos, Mr. Additional, it is like a war zone. I'm glad you used snafu, which is a war term, right? It's like a war zone trying to get petrol. So why has it taken this long?
Because there is that time lag between the time you place orders and the time the cargo arrives and the time it is distributed to filling stations. There is usually that time lag. So when there is that glitch, like we have had, and the cargo had to be returned, that means that there is then a vacuum to be filled. And that vacuum can only be filled when a new order is made and the cargo arrives and fuel is distributed to the filling stations. That's why it took so long.
Well, Mr. Additional, allow me to segue into one other matter, which of course is a concern to everyone. And this is like a cocktail of issues in one. It has insecurity, has unemployment, has education, all in one. It's the statement credited to former President Obasanjo, where he says that the Nigerian population today is about 250 million, and 15 million children are not in school. If we don't do anything about those children, we're already nurturing the Boko Haram of tomorrow. That definitely is something that is of concern. And along the line, he talked about the need for education and for employment for these children now, education for the children now, and employment for the youth in the environment, especially those who are vulnerable now. He was recounting his own experience. I'm sure you have seen that story. So question then would be, as I said, it's a cocktail of issues: insecurity, education, and employment in one. I don't know how you want to take them on.
Well, those facts are real, and it's a reflection of the state of our polity. But I'll also add that even under President Obasanjo, you had those things there. Maybe to a lesser degree, to a lesser percentage, but they were there. They were there. And that tells you that what is happening in this country today is a accumulation from many administrations, including that of President Obasanjo. And why does government exist? Government exists to solve problems. And would one government solve all Nigeria's problems? No. One administration will not solve all the problems in the country. It will solve the ones it can, and the next one comes and continues in that trajectory. So, what former President Obasanjo said, is true. But it also happened under him, maybe to a lesser degree.
Well, it is that on that point of being to a lesser degree that is of concern to me right now. If it was to a lesser degree under him, one would expect that successive governments such as this one that you are in right now would take it even to an even lesser degree, if I can use the term, to borrow your words. So one is wondering, the promise of the president to, you know, champion the cause of taking 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in 10 years. One would expect that since it's about 2 years into that now, 20 million people would have been taken out of poverty already. I don't know if you have the facts to answer to that. Education is an issue as well. 15 million, he says, UNICEF says we have the highest number of out-of-school children in the world. Those issues are of concern. I would definitely be like some kind of, a bump on the back of this government.
Thank you. But you will recall that maybe 2 or 3 years ago, before COVID, there was actually a vast reduction in the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria. The figures are in the public domain. If you can check it up, about 3 years ago. But then you know that the challenge of COVID-19 came and the economy nosedived, not just the Nigerian economy, the global economy. The havoc that COVID wreaked on the country and indeed the global economy is yet to be fully understood because it caused a lot of setback. We had recorded significant improvements in the number of out-of-school children. And suddenly the thing ballooned because you had that challenge, many challenges, including COVID-19. And talking of previous governments, I told you earlier, it's a cumulation. If we had it under Obasanjo, Yar'Adua came after him, Jonathan came after him, and then there's Muhammadu Buhari. It's a cumulation. You can't then come and lay everything at the doorstep of Muhammadu Buhari, but he will do the best he can to mollify the situation. Talking of how many people have been taken out of poverty in 2 years, I return that challenge to the media. The president has made that promise. Why can't the media investigate by talking to the right agencies in government? There is Ministry of Labor and Employment, there's National Directorate of Employment, all those. Why don't you do an investigation to come out to say, in 2 years, this is actually the number of people that have been taken out of poverty?
Well,
we don't have to return it to government at all times. It's also
absolutely
our duties as media people to investigate it.
Well, Mr. Adesina, even the ones that are statutorily responsible, I mean agencies, for doing certain things have not. The National Population Commission, for example, there hasn't been a census, except you want the media to carry out the census for Nigeria. So, I mean, there are things government agencies are meant to do that are not even doing it. We essentially are meant to get these things at the tip of our fingers. But let me quickly take this to politics, because you said that the president, tries to wade into these issues to sort them out. But politically speaking, the APC has been going through a lot of, back and forth. Just yesterday, a letter was sent to INEC saying that they will have zonal congresses on March the 26th. The same day, another statement was put out that, okay, you know what, it will be the convention on that day, and then we'll have the zonal congress earlier. So many things happening. I just wonder, to what extent is the president involved as a national leader of the party, involved in what's going on in the APC right now? Because it doesn't look like, things are really going smooth.
Every party has its issues. And it's not just APC that has issues. Every party has its issues. One party that has sacked all its national chairmen. The national chairman over the years left office involuntarily. Was that party APC? No. So all the parties have issues. Your question is, what is the involvement of the president? The president is like the national leader of the party. And so he's interested because he derived his own legitimacy from the party. He was elected on the platform of the party. Today, for instance, he's meeting with all governors elected on the platform of the party. That is an involvement. Remember that when the Maimala Buni committee came in, it was because the president got involved. There was like a standoff in the party between the former national chairman and some members of the National Working Committee. And the president stepped in, and we have this caretaker committee coming. So the president is a member of the party, is a leader of the party, and is involved in the fortunes of the party.
Do we have an idea of what the resolutions are going to be today? I mean, why is the president calling for a meeting of the governors?
That meeting was to have held on Tuesday last week, but the president was traveling to Brussels the same day. And so he put it off. It was put off by 1 week. It's happening today, precisely at 3 p.m. After that, I'm sure that all the resolutions of the meeting will be communicated to the media.
Indeed. I mean, we certainly will be, on the standby to get the resolutions of the meeting. But again, there was already inkling. The president didn't just decide he was going to travel the day he traveled. I think it was a Tuesday or so.
Yes, it was Tuesday.
He must have known that he was going to travel, yet the governors were invited for a meeting. I think some of them had individual meetings with him before he eventually left. But that group meeting wasn't possible.
No, it was also explained that that meeting had been put off, but there was communication problem. How many governors came in? Less than 5, because others got the communication that the meeting would not hold on that day. Mm-hmm. It was those who didn't get it that came in.
Yes, but there was also inkling that on Saturday or so, which was supposed to be the date, 26th, I think, is the date of the convention initially,
yes.
26th of February, there was already inkling that it wasn't going to happen anymore, considering the fact that the president was traveling and that if he was going to return on Saturday, it would leave less than a week for the planning of the actual convention, and there was still a lot left undone.
That couldn't have been the reason. That couldn't have, because the party has its apparatus. And the apparatus will continue to function even if the president was not around. So the postponement of the convention is not because the president was not around.
Okay, so what do we make of this, this law now? Because right now it would seem that the CECPC has lost a lot of ground in terms of trust with members of the party. Some people have said, the February 26th date was sacrosanct and nothing was going to move that date, considering how many moves they had before that time. Is there going to be some reshuffling or some reconstitution, or do you have an idea of what will be happening with the CECPC?
If it's not broken, why do you fix it?
You don't think it's broken?
No. Every party has its issues. Every party. We know one party that held its own convention months before it should have held, and when it elected a new national chairman, he couldn't take office until the date in which the previous national chairman will have his term expiring. He didn't become the legitimate chairman until that date. So it happens everywhere. It happens.
Let me quickly take you up on this issue of security as we wrap up, because I know that there will be plenty of time for politics. The political actors will be coming in right after you. But this issue of security, we understand that there was a bomb attack yesterday in some villages close to Shiroro, around the Shiroro area of Niger State. And there are questions. Before now, I think it was the governor of Niger State who had come to the villa and had talked about, the incessant attacks that he had experienced in his state, leading to the death of close to, of 200 people or thereabout, some of them including security personnel that of groups that he had set up. So there are questions as to what attention we're paying to the proliferation of, or will I say the expansion of the activities of people who would like to term terrorists, especially considering the method of attacks that they're currently taking on.
Yeah, your precise question is what attention, and I'll say great attention. Great attention. If there is anything this government is paying the greatest attention to, it is security. Because whenever the president itemizes the priorities of his administration, he will say, we will secure the country. And then he will add that you cannot effectively manage an organization, a state, a country, unless you have secured it. So it is number one in his priority, and then next will usually be, we will revive the economy, and third, we will fight corruption. So security is number one in the priorities of this administration. If the security challenges have not been sorted out, it will not be due to lack of trying. A lot of attention, a lot of funds, have been invested.
What do we know
in
about the attack that happened in Shiroro yesterday?
No, I do not have the details. Maybe the governor, as the chief security officer of the state, will be able to say, I heard it over the news, maybe just as you heard it. But, of course, every attack is worrisome. And remember that the epicenter of bombing was in the northeast, Borno particularly. That bombing has reduced by 95%, if not more. There was a time in this country that bombs went off 3, 4, 5 times in a day. What we don't hear all that again. So it shows you that if that problem was tackled in the northeast, particularly in Borno, it will be tackled in Niger State, where it happened.
Well, Mr. Femi Adesina, I would like to hold on to your assurances, and I believe that the people of Shiroro, too, would also like to hold on to your assurances, especially as they continue to, ask questions about, the security situation, especially in Niger State, in the light of what the governor revealed sometime in January this year, qualified almost as a bombshell by itself. So I certainly know that we'll keep our eyes on what is happening there, but I believe that, the security agencies will also be given details of what they know about that attack, even as they continue to hold on to your assurances. We have to thank you very much for coming in this morning. Mr. Femi Adesina, a special advisor to the President on media and publicity. We will take a break. I already did say that we were going to be talking a little more about politics, and the political actors will be coming in soon. There will be a lot to be said about the now shifted APC convention, but that will be in a moment. Please stay with us.